This is the scaffold I'm using with my students at the moment, but a warning again, I can't stress it enough, it's dangerous giving you too much of a scaffold for 20 marker. Use this intelligently, try it, test it out, adapt it, but as a rough guideline, I'm using this because it seems to be a way to hit this mark scheme of what we're looking for. So it's a variation on ones I've done before with paper 1, 2 and 3, but this one is a little bit more tailored in. I think it needed adapting for paper 4. So the intro, define the question in your own terms, hit the key terms, demonstrate, develop relevant knowledge. By the way, this scaffold, the link below, you can download this scaffold PDF form on the ECM Tutor website, link up here again, but that's the best place, read it. I'm not going to read it all to you. State or hint your conclusion. Then, analysis of the individual strategic element. Choose an individual strategic element from there. I'm going to be using this with paper 1. Point, clearly, succinctly, this means that which leads to. Now, I haven't put the full chain in here because they are really stressing the fact that they want the balance. So I've got 2 in the chain, and now I'm going within the same paragraph. However, because we need this counterpoint, then I'm going to put the however in here. This means that, and I'm going to put 2 in the chain of the counterpoint against that. Again, I'll demonstrate what I mean later in the video with a question. And then finally, a mini conclusion. So it seems the answer to the question is heavily related to app as always, because we said with the mean that we want supported with app. Then I'll have paragraph 3, analyze another individual strategic element from it. And I'm going to follow that same thing. Half of it is going to be on one side with 2 in the chain, then a however, and then a mini conclusion. Then paragraph 4, analysis of the overall strategy. This is key to hit the level 3 in the evaluation. So you're looking not just an individual strategic element, but the overall. What generally were they doing? I'll show it later on with a question. Point, this means that which leads to. However, this means which leads to that same structure. And then the conclusion being absolutely key. In my opinion, answer the actual question. Although I said anything that you've countered where we were like you've left me a little bit unsure, cancel it. Then my main reason is, what is the key thing that you're going to leave me with? Imagine you're a business consultant persuading people. What is the key thing you're going to leave people with? And then however my decision would depend on, and that is crucial. Again, dependent factor to get those full marks. What does that look like then? I'm going to show you now how I use that scaffold to fit it with one of the questions. I'm not going to go through both. I'll just go through the question 1. Again, find the paper, look over the resource yourself so it'll make a bit of sense. I'm not saying this is a perfect answer. Model answers are too risky. Even exam boards don't want to give model answers. What I'm doing here is I'm not even using my own knowledge points. I've taken the knowledge points from the mark scheme and shown how those knowledge points, their ones that they like, can be adapted and fit into this structure. And it won't be the smoothest of essays because it's following a scaffold, but what it should be able to do is make sure that it hits each of the levels necessary from the AO1 to AO4. So let's get on with it. I'm looking at this question. Evaluate the usefulness to QA of the approaches used to develop business strategy between 2021 and 2024. Now, I can't write anything until I've fully understood the resource. So I've already thought about that. I've already got an opinion and I know it's about strategies. I need to look at the paper. I need to remember what strategies do they use. I also need to think, because I know on this, they're looking at overall strategy. I want to know which particular individual strategies they had, and then I want to know what was their overall strategy. That's the bit people miss out and they don't hit the mark scheme. So I put my plan, I go through each of the strategies and I pick out which do I think is the 2 most important. And then I need a conclusion that I'm going to come to, and I think this, evaluate the usefulness of approaches of the business strategy. I think I can get away along the lines of which was the most useful. So that's what I'm heading for. I've got to have overall strategy in here, but I also think I can draw a conclusion of saying, what do I think was the most useful thing they did? And you should have felt that when you read it. And I'm going to say in this one, because I'm hitting the mark scheme, not that I particularly felt it, but the most useful thing I'm going to say is SWOT. Right. So, going to be a bit boring. I'm going to read out what I've put in here. Not the neatest of things, but fitting this structure, this scaffold, so you can see how to apply it yourself. Okay, reading through. Business strategy tools are used by managers to analyze, choose, and then implement business strategy. That's a good opening, I think. That's straight away getting in my knowledge mark, certainly level 1 knowledge, and I reckon it might even be level 2, because that's quite high level understanding of strategy that they can be broken down into those 3 categories. So it's a good opening. First sentence, most important in an essay. Last sentence, most important, because it's what they read and get the impression of you when they're giving these big subjective marks between 0 and 20. Strategic management is undertaken by the highest level of managers at QA, where they analyze the current business situation, set long-term objectives, decide on business strategy to achieve them, and then implement. Good knowledge, really trying to get those AO1s in the bag in the first opening there. QA, a small smart speaker company in country A, used a number of strategy tools between 2021. However, the most significant are SWOT and decision trees. That's saying, I know they did loads. I haven't got time to talk about all. I'm going to pick 2. I'm going to be letting you know about SWOT and decision. They're the most important. And I'm going to be deciding which is the most important. SWOT, to get more knowledge. SWOT identifies internal strengths and weaknesses alongside external opportunities and threats, allowing firms to match capabilities and market conditions, just throwing out knowledge. AO1. Decision trees calculate the expected monetary values of different courses of action using probabilities and payoff, offering a more quantitative approach. I think I've got most of my AO1 marks there already. Not totally, but it's really up there. Then I like to give the conclusion so no one can say I haven't done it. Some people don't like it, leave it to the end, but I think it's nice just to nail the marks. So for QA, these approaches have been useful, but the most useful was SWOT. That's what I'm going to try and prove in the essay, along with, remember, saying the overall strategy, because we need that in there as well. So now I'm going to talk about an individual strategy, and I go through with counterbalance, the good side of SWOT and the bad side. So, SWOT analysis allows businesses to use strengths to overcome threats and opportunities to overcome weaknesses. Not my words, mark scheme works. I don't love that as a knowledge point. I don't think it's absolutely true. I think it doesn't give you the tools, it just gets you aware of them. That's not my point. That's what's in the mark scheme. This means that it provided an overview for QA and provided directors with data to enable effective formulation of the business strategy. Chain of analysis, what this means, what did they actually do? Directors knew that the strength was the early success of QA1, which achieved 6% of market share. Application, AO2, going into my analysis, getting analysis because it's chain of analysis, which leads that this enabled QA to build confidence in its brand and provide a base to develop QA2, a bit more application, especially the smart meter market in country A that was forecasted to grow by 17% in 2025. Application and analysis. Now counterbalance to hit the analysis ones. However, SWOT only provides a snapshot of the business at one point in time and depends upon the accuracy of research, knowledge point from the mark scheme. In QA's case, analysis, external threats such as the actions of Apple and Google were unlikely to be fully captured by SWOT because they dominated the market and can rapidly shift conditions. Application, AO2. This limited the reliability of SWOT for predicting how QA2 would perform once launched, which competitors' responses could quickly undermine the strategy. Analysis, application. Then, mini conclusion, get some evaluation. So it seems the answer to this question is that SWOT was useful for giving QA an overview of its current position and pointing towards QA and pointing towards QA2, but in the long term, its usefulness was restricted in a fast-changing technology market where a competitor moves more decisively. So I was wrapping up saying, but not a full conclusion, but saying, hey, there were pros and cons. It was good in the short term then. Really good in these essays to think of the future of a business in the short term and in the future. So I've got analysis. Now on to the other side, before I take too long and bore you all to death. Decision trees like SWOT are tools used for making choices. They allow quantitative understanding of outcome, AO1. They enable directors to make objective decisions using the expected values. In 2023, QI's directors used the decision tree to decide whether to launch QA2 in 2024 or wait until 2025. Application, what they were using it for, which led chain of analysis. This gave QA a clear framework to compare options and help reduce subjective bias when debating the timing of the launch. That's what they do. They make something subjective, quantitative with numbers, so it got some in there. However, the data in the decision tree is only as good as the research, counterbalance, and in new technology markets, probabilities are highly uncertain. They're really not very accurate when you're talking about tech, like Alexa and ChatGPT and those sorts of things. This means that in QA's case, the decision tree suggested similar outcomes for both options, a 0.6 difference, I seem to remember, a million, not much, yet directors decided to trust the result and launch early. The estimates failed to capture crucial risks such as quality problems and lack of capacity, which is what happened to them. Yeah, it gave you a nice number, but it didn't take the whole picture into account, counterbalance. Which leads to, this resulted in 18% of QA2s being returned, application, analysis, faulty, and 65% of customers unwilling to recommend the product. So it was a disaster. And QA made a public apology, showing the tree did not safeguard the business from its biggest threats. So did the tree help there? No, it definitely didn't. We've got some passion there. It was a disaster following that tree's recommendation. Mini conclusion. So it seems the answer to the question is that decision trees gave QA structure and objectivity, but their usefulness was limited because of inaccurate assumptions, meant they did not prevent damaging outcomes once QA2 was launched. So it's not going to be a great a strategy that they'd want to do again. Maybe they should, but it had huge limitations. Now we need this paragraph in here, overall strategy. It's going to feel clumsy in here, but we have to have it to hit the mark scheme. The questions are a bit weird, but we have to have this. So, in general, business tools such as SWOT and decision trees are useful. So, overall tools, because they structure thinking, highlight risk, and provide frameworks for directors to evaluate alternatives. This means that they reduce complexity and encourage systematic discussion. For QA, these tools help directors identify that QA1 was in decline and that a new product was needed. However, the usefulness of tools depends heavily on accurate data and operational planning. They cannot guarantee a good outcome. I'm still just following this structure. This means that in QA's case, although the tool supported the decision to launch QA2, they did not address crucial issues such as testing, capacity planning, and pricing research, which leads to, this meant that QA2 was launched early in 2024, but suffered 18% returns, 65% of customers unwilling to recommend, and a public apology, proving that tools alone were not enough to secure success. So that is strategy overall. The tools, they're good, but you can't do everything. You also need je ne sais quoi, a feeling that goes with business. We have to use both of these. So that's, in QA's case, although tools supported the decision to launch QA2, they did not address crucial issues such as testing capacity and planning and pricing research. I don't love that paragraph, but I'm really putting it in because I have to hit that mark scheme of overall strategy. If I don't, they're going to say, yeah, talk about elements. They say it, talk about elements, but also don't forget the overall. What was the overall strategy? Writing it. Finally, most important, conclusion. In my opinion, SWOT was more useful to QA's business strategy than decision trees. And I think I've been pretty conclusive by reading the rest of the essay. Although I said decision trees gave objectivity and a clear framework, their usefulness was undermined because the data was uncertain and it just messed everything up. My main reason is that SWOT provided QA directors with clear overview of their strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and strengths, at this pointing them towards product development, which was the correct decision at the time. Yes, they did need to create a new speaker. However, now my answer depends upon, we need this dependent factor. If you don't hit the top level of marks. What does this depend on? However, my decision would depend upon the accuracy of research and the actions of competitors. For example, if the probabilities in the decision tree had been more reliable, or if the competitor had launched a disruptive product, then the relative usefulness of each tool could be very, very different. So I have to end by saying, all right, I said decision trees were a bit rubbish, but maybe that's not really their fault. It's because the data that was put into them. So you've got your dependent factor. That's therefore how I would structure it. This would look like this if you put it all together without that, which is quite a lot. 30 minutes, maybe we don't need all of that, but that's it following the structure. That should take us to the end. That's paper 4. Hopefully that means you're nearly done on A level. Best of luck in your exams. I hope everything goes well.